At the very end of July, a client came to me with a very interesting project to turn a bunch of rags into a Victorian Goth skirt. And I think several months later, we have succeeded. The client came to me with a dress that seems to be from the 1920s, and it had some really cool beading on it, which definitely seemed to fit my client's goth aesthetic. It had these cool spider webs across the whole skirt and these adorable little spiders all the way around the top. And when I first heard about this project, I was a little bit worried because I was picturing the incredibly dense beadwork of some 1920s dresses, but thankfully, this beading looked somewhat approachable. And I had desperately been wanting a beading project, so I jumped at the opportunity to work on this. I took it home and spread it out to get an idea of the damage and a better idea of the shape of the skirt. And I noticed some interesting things. Number one, this dress was not salvageable. It didn't have any sentimental value. We don't know where it came from or whose it was. And it was not made very well. It had absolutely no lining, which I think was part of the big problem. And it was severely torn in several places. The bodice had almost fallen off. It had so many horizontal tears in it. And someone had also cut down the front of the bodice with some scissors at some point recently, because that wasn't very frayed. So we knew that this wasn't going to be a repair job. This was going to be a reuse job, which is very historically accurate. So the first thing I did was to carefully separate the bodice from the skirt because I knew we weren't going to be able to use any of the bodice. So I don't know if you can really see the difference here. The polyester side is clearly melted and kind of shiny because it's basically plastic. And this one, the silk, it is ashy on the edge. Ashy and brittle and falls apart, whereas this one is just hard and plasticky. So, looks like this is actually silk on both the bodice and the skirt. So, knowing that it's silk means that I think we can wash it with water as long as we wash the entire thing very, very gently. The big problem with water and silk, as far as I know, which I will do a little bit more research before I actually do this. But as far as I understand, with silk taffeta, water can affect the shine of it. But as long as you do the entire garment, it's not as big of a problem because it's not noticeable. And I think given how there's like this ashy white stuff on everything, it could just be dust, but I also don't know. I think I will go ahead and wash it as long as these samples turn out okay. If these are all right by tomorrow, then I think I will go ahead and do that, probably over the weekend before the beads arrive. So today I went around the waist and unpicked all of those. I'm probably gonna have to take it down a little bit just because where that seam was is really rough at the moment. It is very, very worn. I also went up the back, which was this weird, like hands done seam. It actually kind of looks like someone took out a big round piece, like to make a purse or something, and then they just closed it up again. I don't know why they would have done that in this way. It's a very strange way to do it. All right, let's see how these samples are looking. Polyester, obviously it's probably gonna be absolutely fine. I'm really not seeing anything. So I think what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna take this one and I'm gonna put it in a jar of water for 2 hours and see if the chlorine in my tap water degrades it at all. Okay, let's see how this looks. Well, it's not in teeny tiny pieces. That's a really good sign. Pulling on it. Yeah, still got a decent amount of strength. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna leave this out to lie flat somewhere. I'm gonna grab a paper towel actually, and we will see how it looks in a few minutes when it's dry. but I think for the moment, I think it's good. It definitely doesn't feel like it's disintegrated, because I mean, it was already kind of delicate, but it also doesn't look faded at all, at least not yet. And the water doesn't look discolored or anything. It looks perfectly clear. So yeah, I think we might be okay with washing it. Boy, am I glad that I washed it. The water from the first wash was extremely brown. It looked like tea, basically. It was really, really bad. So I let it soak for another 30 minutes a little bit later, and then I laid it out flat to dry completely until it was all good to go. Check out the sparkle! It's so pretty. So, good news. This is clean. I love it. It is so much better. I also just washed the extra beads that I ended up having to remove in a little bit of dish soap and water, and I'm leaving those to dry. The new beads should be arriving in a couple of days. So let's take a look at what we have here. I'm not seeing any new damage, and also I did not lose any beads. I checked multiple times. Every single time I soaked it 3 times. There were no beads left over at all. That was a very good sign. Now this hole I already knew about, so that's okay. This whole section here is weird because it was not an original seam. And it's very strange the way they decided to do this. It's like at some point someone decided that they wanted to have a purse or something out of this beading. And so they just cut this huge swath out. It was like from here to here. I don't know why they would do that and not just go all the way up. And it looks like this must have all fallen out. It's just, this is so strangely put together. But first things first, we should go ahead and simplify this line, just because I'm not going to have this pucker here. I'm kind of surprised that the chalk didn't leave after 3 soaks. It's strange. And nicely, this actually all connects up, but I guess they just didn't end up stitching it, which is kind of strange. So hopefully I can get this to work. And then there's the skirt. It has been ironed, and I have removed the really rough edges from that weird seam in the middle. And I've also removed the beading from about 1/2 inch from those edges so that I'll be able to sew it to the lining, which is right here. This is just a polyester taffeta because I just cannot afford to get a silk taffeta, but I am pretty happy with it. I got started trying to figure out how the waistband of this skirt would work. Now, my initial idea was just to have kind of a corset on top that would fit really well with the Victorian Goth aesthetic, but it just didn't ever quite sit right with me. I got pretty far. I even made a mock-up, and I kind of like this idea of like a corset with the spider webbing on it. But I couldn't quite make friends with it because the skirt was at such an awkward length. But my client ideally would have a skirt that was about 37 inches long, and this was, I think, about 27. So we were missing 10 inches of fabric here. Now, I could have replaced all of that with a really long waistband that went like past the hips, but at that point we're starting to look kind of 80s prom, and I it didn't quite feel right. We also could have added some ruffle on the bottom, but I mocked that up and that really didn't feel right either. And I thought, what if there was a Victorian skirt style that would really work with adding a bunch more fabric to this skirt? And I found this picture on Pinterest, and this design was perfect. Not only did it have a large hip section that would add a bunch of extra fabric, but it had a nice wide front section so that we could add in more circumference to the skirt. And in addition, it had this really cool framed look. And I was thinking if we put the original fabric within that frame, it would show it off nicely. It kind of looks like a little picture frame around the original beaded fabric. So this is the direction we went. I pulled out the Keystone jacket and dress cutter and used the slim skirt pattern as the base for this. And then I had the very difficult step of trying to fit a square of fabric into a semicircular skirt, which took a lot of head scratching. I ended up making the front section a little bit more angled, and I decided to have a gore of new taffeta in the back to add a bit of extra circumference as well that I was going to bead and try to hide within pleats in order to extend that beaded section of fabric. I basted the silk taffeta down to the poly taffeta that I had, and I got to work beading. Now, before I get deep into the beading section, let me go on a little bit of a rant about the different shapes of bugle beads. This was a huge side quest that I knew I was going to have to figure out in order for this skirt to look right. Now, the original skirt had two kinds of beads. They had small hex cut seed beads, which were about 2 or 3 millimeters long and about the same width-wise, and they had hexagonal bugle beads. Now, bugle beads are the long tubes, and the hexagon is how it looks if you look like straight down the hole. So if this is your bead, usually it's nice and wide. If you look at it this direction, this shape is a hexagon. Now, I knew when I first saw this that we were going to need to have the right shape of beads to match the skirt, and I was hoping that hex cut bugle beads would be relatively easy to find. They were not. I first started by just looking on Amazon because I knew that would be probably the cheapest option, and there were none. I could find no hexagonal black bugle beads of the right size. The only hexagons I could find were really, really big, and all of the other bugle beads were either twisted or round. I went to Fire Mountain Gems. They had a metallic black hex cut bugle bead, which I thought could work. It was definitely the closest I had found. However, it didn't. They were definitely silvery gray looking compared to the ones in the original skirt, and they would have stood out a lot. So I thought, okay, maybe we could try the round beads or the twisted beads. And this is what led me down the path of being very frustrated with the shape of beads. Round bugle beads are just a basic cylinder, kind of like a water bottle, right? The problem with this is the highlight that you're going to get is going to be a straight line, which you'd think would be fine. However, when you rotate the bead like this, that specular highlight stays in exactly the same place, which means it does not sparkle. If you moved the original skirt around, the hex cut beads have large flat faces, which means that they catch the light and then the light disappears, which means you get this really bright flash of light from the bead as it turns, which creates this really gorgeous sparkling effect. So I thought maybe the twisted bugle beads would work because they have hexagonal ends. It's just they are twisted a little bit. However, the shape of the twist isn't right either because it is now concave, which takes the light and makes it into a little point. And these little points kind of fade in and out and move back and forth along the bead, which creates a cool look. It kind of looks like gently twinkling stars, but it's a very slow and gentle twinkle, and it is not bright flashes of light, which you got with the hexagonal bugle beads. So I had to do a lot of searching, and eventually I found a lovely lady on Etsy named Teresa Sullivan. I will make sure to link her bead store on Etsy down below because she has a huge variety of beads and she's absolutely lovely. So make sure you go check her out. This is not sponsored by her, but it was definitely made possible by her. I had to buy, I think, 5 or 6 little bags of these hex cut beads because I had a lot of beads to replace. So I could not have done this without her. Now with the correct beads finally in hand, I was able to get started in earnest. And then I spent the next several days, weeks, beading all of this fabric. I did leave a large section around the edges unbeaded so that I could sew them together later. Thankfully, the design of the beading is very forgiving. So I was able to continue the design across the extra section of polytaffeta, and I was able to hide that pretty well. I played around with the idea of adding beaded to the new polytaffeta front panel. However, by the end, I really liked the idea of just keeping the beading on those side panels to really show off the original work and not try to hide it, if that makes sense. Okay, the front panel is finally on. It's a little wider than I'd potentially like, but I think it'll be all right because we're gonna take a little bit off of it with some lace, and we're going to bring the beading all the way over to the edge. And then I need to trim the top of this and attach this whole hip panel section, which I have now put the darts in, so that is basically all ready to go. One little trick that I did to hide the raw seams on the inside of the skirt was to actually cover all of the edges with some ribbon. I had a 1-inch wide black ribbon, and I had enough to put it along pretty much all of the seams. And I did this for 2 reasons. One, because especially in the front, I wanted to make sure that this seam between the polytaffeta and the beaded fabric was strong enough that it at least had a little bit of extra support. And another reason was just because I wasn't going to fully line this skirt, but I did want it to feel a little bit more finished than just having raw edges left, and I don't have a serger, and I really didn't want to have to fell everything by hand. I added this really pretty black lace around the edge of the silk taffeta sections, and then I realized before I did much more that I was going to need to make a hip pad for this skirt. And my client didn't have a hip pad yet. So I decided that I was going to spend Christmas Day just making one real quick. And it was very easy. I love making hip pads like this. I really want one now because it ended up looking so cool. I filled it with fabric scraps, so it is quite sturdy. It is still a little squishy, but it's not as soft as it would be if I used foam, because I knew that this beaded fabric was going to make this skirt very, very heavy, and it would probably just squish any other kind of padding that I could use. And I added this really cute 3/4 inch box pleat around the edges, and I think that turned out so nice that I knew that was what I had to do for the last little section of the skirt, which was this trim all the way around the bottom. And that was a huge pain. I do not recommend hand pleating 10 yards of fabric, but it did turn out beautiful, so it was worth it in the end. For the waistband, I knew that I wanted to have some extra sturdiness, so I used this black waist tape that you would usually use in a corset, and I used that for the waistband and covered it with a bit of the poly taffeta as well. I also decided to pleat the back. I played around with the idea of doing box pleats, but I ended up just doing basic pleats. Thankfully, the entire poly taffeta section is hidden very well within the pleats, so it just adds a lot of swirliness and sparkle and helps create the silhouette without being too obvious, which is awesome. Once I attached the ruffles, all I had to do was a little bit of extra beading along the bottom. I ended up adding one extra cute little spider in this one section because there was a large hole in the original silk taffeta and I wanted to cover it up with something, so I covered it up with another cute little spider. It's the only spider that's out of place, so it's kind of an Easter egg to try to find it. And I love how the skirt turned out. It is so richly detailed and the silhouette of it is lovely, and I was so nervous to hand it over to the client, but thankfully it fit perfectly and she looked gorgeous. She got all done up with all of her goth makeup and everything, and it was also really fun because I have not been able to do any of my reveals with a client yet. This was the first time I was able to actually take footage of someone else instead of trying to take footage of myself, which was really fun. And she was very kind to do this whole film shoot in the extreme cold. It was probably 37 degrees or so and the light was fading, but we managed to get some really pretty shots and it looked so good. I loved the movement, it swirled beautifully, the silhouette was perfect, it was so dramatic. The beads sparkled exactly the way I wanted them to, and she loved it, and I was so relieved.